Hello, everyone. My name is Fumiya Iida from the Bio-Inspired Robotics Lab at the University of Cambridge. Today, I'd like to talk about our research on physical evolutionary robotics. This slide shows a brief overview of human cell differentiation. As we all know, each of us humans starts our life from a single cell, and in the first 10 months or so, this single cell is grown into a fetus consisting of approximately 10 to the 10 cells. From there, we still continue growing about 1,000 times until we become an adult human. An important point we should notice is that the single cell is differentiated into many different kinds of cells, including brain, skin, hairs, blood, muscles, heart, and bones, and so on and so forth. This is something none of our current robotic systems are able to do, and this is a significant challenge at the moment. And obviously, this is not the end of the story. Our body is continuously replacing the cell throughout our lives, and the number of body parts would be orders of magnitude more if we can count the molecules as the body constituent. Another surprising fact is that compared to the complexity of our body, the amount of information contained in the human genome is surprisingly small. It is estimated that the human genome contains approximately 700 megabytes, which essentially means that one bit of information in our genome is roughly in charge of the design of 1,800 cells on average. We can learn a lot lesson from biological growth. First of all, we should all remember that the scalability and complexity is enormous in the biological systems, and therefore, if we build our bio-inspired robots in a similar level of complexity, we should not build manually, and we also need precision and robustness in the construction process, otherwise it won't scale. Second, morphological diversity is another challenging problem because morphology is the origin of everything, but morphology should change, grow, or evolve over time. Efficient search and optimization is necessary because of the dimensionality of mechanical system. And third, the roles of environment are very important. Because genomes don't have all of the necessary information of design process, it needs to rely on the environment, which includes building materials that are supplied by environment, and even fitness function can be provided by environment for free. For systematic investigation of physical evolutionary robotics, we have been working on this conceptual framework of robot genome model. We assume that all robots can be built from the information given by a genome through phenotyping. And then physical robots can be also assessed for improvement through selection or reproduction process. This is obviously a challenging framework for roboticists to achieve in reality, but it is actually quite feasible if we define the idea of a mother robot, which we have been working in a decade or so. Mother robot does the phenotyping by translating genome information into physical robot designs. And mother robot also does the observation of physical robots behaving with the environment to modify the genotype to improve the overall behavior in generations. With this concept of mother robots, all we need for evolution is to add the environment to the framework, which has two essential roles. Firstly, environment needs to supply materials to construct physical robots. And second, environment interacts with the robots for evolutionary processes. In the rest of my talk today, I will explain how important these roles in the environment and how this could be impacting the research of physical evolutionary robotics. To think about material supplies in physical evolutionary robotics, Connection and disconnection mechanisms of constituent elements plays the most significant roles because it determines the diversity of mechanical characteristics in robots to evolve. So far, we found that the hot melt adhesives, also known as hot glue, is one of the most promising options for several reasons. First, the material is thermoplastic, which allows us to control Young's modulus from liquid or very soft to rigid regime with a relatively small range of temperature. Second, this material has also a very high bonding strength, which allows both bonding and unbonding of a wide range of materials as long as they are not wet. By using this hot melt adhesives materials, the first thing we tried is the additive manufacturing methods. The robot shown in the video has a specifically designed end effector, which is able to 3D print the materials as well as control bonding and unbonding through the temperature control. We have developed 4 types of material handling techniques so that the robot is able to construct a wide range of structures. This video shows that first the robot constructs the stick out of the 3D printing, then a cup, which is connected to the stick so that the robot can equip with a small scoop for transporting water. The video demonstrates that because of the hot melt adhesives materials, the robot is able to construct and operate a wide range of tools without human intervention. But obviously, all designs are given by human designers. So the next big challenge is how the robot is able to come up with these designs automatically without human giving the design. To make the autonomous design process possible, we have also employed the evolutionary algorithm to the hot glue handling system. This system uses the same hot melt adhesives to bond the cubic modules that contains batteries, motors, and onboard controller. Because of the flexibility of hot melt adhesives, these cubes can be bonded into many different configurations, thus many mechanical variations of child robots are possible. Mother robots try variations of designs in child robots and test their locomotion capability through natural selection process. This figure on the right-hand side shows one of the largest experiments we did so far, in which the mother robot starts the evolution with a 10 set of random designs, measure average locomotion speed, and perform selection process through crossover and the mutations. We usually observe the improvement of performance over 100 trials and errors, as shown here. The largest experiment we've done so far is the 500 robots construction and testing in about a month's time. Here's the videos of some of the successful robots evolved in the experiments. We have found a large variation of locomotion robots from small, slow locomotors to large, faster ones. Some of them are found to be very interesting as they are able to walk in unsteady manner, which are often very difficult for human designers to design. We have also tried to employ 3D printing of hot melt adhesives in the evolutionary process. In this experiment, instead of using many cube modules, the mother robot 3D print parts to be attached to a single cube to see more variation of morphological designs and locomotion patterns. This framework allows us to try many variations of mechanical structures so that material can also be thin to deform, which may or may not be advantageous for locomotion and overall evolutionary dynamics. However, a significant drawback we found in this approach is that the manufacturing time, because it requires approximately 30 to 45 minutes to manufacture and test a single robot, we're not able to run large-scale experiments with this approach. So far, we talked about how material supply from the environment gives an influence to the physical evolutionary robotics. But in the next step, we would like to discuss the physical interactions with the environment. For this investigation, we selected the so-called falling paper problem. This experimental framework considers the behaviors of a piece of paper freely falling in still air. Because of the rich dynamics in fluidic interaction between the paper and the air, there are many different ways how papers can fall, and in fact, every single fall is unique. It is important to note that there are 4 patterns of falling, or falling species, if you like, which are steadily falling, periodic falling, chaotic falling, and the tumbling falling patterns. It is also important to notice that the falling papers can be characterized by the design of the paper itself, as well as conditions of environment. The figure on the right-hand side shows that the relationship between y-axis specific moment of inertia and the x-axis Reynolds number, which are roughly corresponding to the design of paper and the environmental condition, respectively. This diagram nicely illustrates that the behavioral papers are not only dependent on the design of paper, but also the conditions of the environment. For systematic investigation of the falling paper problem, we have developed this new version of mother robot that is able to perform a large-scale experimentation of falling papers. The robot is able to laser cut pieces of papers, and the suction cup is able to pick up and throw them in the variation of postures. The falling papers are also visually tracked by stereo cameras for the analysis of falling behaviors. This system is able to perform each experiment in about 1 minute, which allows us a large-scale experiment with a relatively small amount of time. The most research of falling paper in the past has been conducted exclusively on the disk shape as shown in the figures on the left-hand side. This is because of the complexity of analysis, but the system we developed allows us to explore many different shapes of the paper observed in the evolution of complex shapes experimentally. This slide on the right-hand side shows one example that 4 different types of shape profiles, namely disc shape, square shape, hexagon shape, and the cross shapes of various sizes, exhibiting falling behaviors structurally similar to the disk, but it's widely shifting to distributed patterns depending on the shapes of the papers. More drastic change of falling behavior can be observed with the different shapes of the papers. In this experiment, we employed a V-shaped paper with a small mass attached at the bottom, which typically shows 4 types of falling patterns. We varied the length and width of the V-shapes and analyzed how these parameters determine the falling behaviors, such as promenting, undulating, helicopter, and asymmetric rotating. This experiment shows that the mechanical design of V-shape is potentially one-to-one mapping to the behavior of falling paper. However, actually, falling papers are slightly more complex in reality, as one design does not always result in the same pattern deterministically, but they change patterns probabilistically. This diagram shows one analysis of such transient falling patterns and how falling styles probabilistically change depending on the design of the falling papers. It is interesting to mention that some transitions are almost deterministic than others, and this can be regarded as the basis for programming one complex behavior pattern through morphological parameters. In summary, this talk introduced the work in progress in our investigation on robot genome models. The main take-home message is that the physical evolutionary robotics is actually feasible with the recent advances in robotics and fabrication techniques. We believe that the robotics research should be done more automatically than manually in the near future. And the second point is that there are many open questions about how physical evolutionary robotics should consider the couplings with the environment. Environment is playing a very important role of material supplies, as well as the interaction with the robots, both of which significantly influence the evolutionary dynamics. The large-scale physical dynamics can offer us a very interesting venue to investigate the challenging problem. And last, I'd like to acknowledge all of our research sponsors and my co-workers at the BioInspire Robotics Lab, in particular, Lucius Broadbeck and Toby Howison, for the very fruitful collaboration so far. More details of this project I introduced in this talk can be found in our website. With this, I'd like to conclude my talk, and thank you very much for your attention.